Sanma no Meitantei is a weird one. The game is a cultural touchstone in Japan, but it's also very much a you had to be there kind of thing. If you weren't in Japan in 1987, then a lot of it's going to go right over your head. The reason for that is this is another licensed game based on a comedian, but it's not really based on a comedian. Sanma Akashiya is the main character in the game, the master detective of the title, but he wasn't involved in the game. Instead, his agency Yoshimoto Kogyo licensed out a lot of their entertainers to appear in this game and chose him to be the lead. So it's really a game based on that agency. The thing is, Yoshimoto Kogyo didn't tell the entertainers that they were making this game. All of the characters in the game are real-life comedians, and they had no say in how they were used in Sanma no Meitantei. In fact, none of them were paid for the use of their likenesses in the game. Something that caused a bit of bad blood. When Game Center CX reached out to Sanma about using the game on the show, they were informed of the situation and chose not to go forward with it. So this is one game that will never be used on Game Center CX. Twisting that knife a little bit, Sanma no Meitantei was very popular. So you can imagine how thrilled these people were to hear how great they were in a game that they had nothing to do with and didn't get paid for. There's one more interesting thing to note about Sanma no Meitantei before we get started. It's the largest Famicom game to date, at 1.5 megabits. Now I haven't been staying on top of that, partially because every 10 games I'd have to go, this is the largest Famicom game to date, and partially because I often miss it until a few days later. The thing is, this is an adventure game. It's static screens with text. They are packing a lot into such a simple game. The story is that Bunchin Katsura has been murdered. It happened during a party where a lot of the popular comedians in Osaka were attending. At the same time, a diamond has been stolen from Bunchin's safe. You're the assistant to the greatest detective in Osaka, Sanma Akashiya. Together you set out to get to the bottom of the mystery. Compare this game with Portopia, and you can see what an improvement we've had. The graphics for what's happening are much larger, the characters are somewhat animated, and there's a more functional interface. The menu goes several layers deep, too. Starting in the top left and going left to right, the foot moves you to new locations. And in this game, that's done via a map. There aren't a lot of spots open initially, but it'll quickly expand. The magnifying glass is for when you want to interact with objects. It brings up a sub-menu of commands that go examine, hit, push, open, rotate, eat or drink, and take. Selecting the verb brings up a menu of items that you know about, but there's also an other option, which brings up a crab cursor that you can use to point and click. I actually don't like the crab very much because it's kind of hard for me to tell where it's pointing at. The photograph on the top menu is to choose who you want to interact with. Some locations have multiple people, and so you can call someone else over by selecting them in that menu. The briefcase is for evidence that you've collected. You could use it, show it to other people, or get some details about it. The big gear guy is for listening. You don't actually talk to suspects yourself, Sanma does. But you can listen in on their conversations, and pick what topic they're going to discuss. The face is Sanma himself. That's for when you're not really sure what to do. You can select it and Sanma will do whatever he wants. The fist is for attacking whoever's in front of you. You're not going to use it very often. Finally, the notebook gives you a password so that you can continue the game. As you'd expect in a game about funny people, Sanma no Meitantei is known for having pretty funny writing. It's a parody game, and some of the things that it parodies are Namco's own games, and some games from other companies. You can swing by this arcade to play an extra difficult variation of Galaxian and get a hint. And if you screw up at the end of the game letting the murderer get away, Sanma says that he's going to quit his job and go search for treasure in the South Pacific. There's other mini-games as well. You're challenged to run across the field of falling objects. That's how you acquire the notebook that lets you get passwords. There's another person who won't talk to you unless you can beat them in a boat race. That minigame's just about button mashing. I don't have a lot more to say about Sanma no Meitantei. It's one gigantic cultural reference for kids of the 80s, and I think it loses a lot of that when you try to play it today. But it's still pretty impressive looking, and there's lots of amusing touches. It's also a big game with lots that you can interact with and things that you can talk about with people. I can see why everybody liked it back in the day. Well, everybody except Sanma himself, of course.